Mhm.
Well, thank you all for coming. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this special event hosted by the Santa Fe Community College Library. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Valerie Nye, the library's director. This afternoon, we have the pure honor of hearing from Miriam Sagan, who's written extensively and taught and encouraged so much creativity in Santa Fe. We're just grateful to have you here. And for those of you who don't know, Miriam founded and directed the creative writing program at Santa Fe Community College until her retirement. I'm grateful to Miriam because she has been a huge supporter of the SFCC library and has consistently chosen the space as a place to share her new work as she is this evening. So thank you so much for always doing that, Miriam. Tonight's event, Miriam has called her presentation Hurting Poems, which is a great title. I have this amazing visual that comes to mind with the title of this presentation. Her reading tonight will feature work from her recent publication, What Solitude Sees in Me, Uncollected Poems, 1976 to 2023. Following the reading, Miriam will lead a discussion and answer some questions. So as you have questions, as she's reading or as they come to mind, please put them in the chat and I will collect them and share them during the question part of the presentation. And I think we're a group small enough. If you do have questions you want to ask, you can unmute yourself at that time. So please join me in welcoming Miriam Sagan. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. It's been very special to work with you, for such a long time and to be able to share a new book and poetry with a lot of people that I love who are not in Santa Fe. So thank you all for coming. I also want to thank, obviously, my publisher, Zach Hively from Casa Urraca Press, and I'll talk a little bit about that more later. What I thought I'd do is read and then maybe give like a little bit of a mini chat on how to put a book manuscript together, because the process for this was very unique and unusual. These poems are uncollected. That meant they were never in a book. And I think, if I'm honest, they were not in a book for a reason. They were too short. They were too cute. They were too noodly. They were too something that they didn't speak to me over. I mean, there's one in here that's 50 years old. And yet, when I went to archive them and send them off to the library in San Marcos, Texas, I suddenly became interested in them again. And so a lot of different things have happened to me as I was putting that process together. It might seem strange. I love haiku, I write haiku, and yet I'm afraid and embarrassed of short poems that aren't haiku. I don't know why. Four-liners, what could be more standard in English? And yet, when I would see them, I would just stick them somewhere else. So I'm going to start off being bold. I'm going to read you a bunch of very short poems, and I've come to like them. How does that sound? The first one is called Acequia, and I've lived a block and a half from the Acequia Madre for most of my life. So this is about the ditch, the mother ditch. Water runs cold in the ditch. All the luck and all the money can't get you what you think you want in this dry country. I think that comes in part from having not been born here, but come here like so many people have, with idealism and romance, only to discover, and I know many of you have had this experience, that the reality is both more challenging and more beautiful than I had expected. This one is for Val. It's called Found in a Library Book. There was actually many, many years ago an exhibit at Main Branch in Santa Fe of things that have been found in library books, just laid out under a glass case. Found in a library book. Black and white snapshots, Smiling soldier leaves for Nam. Two couples the night of St. Mike's prom, a 50th wedding anniversary, anonymous, strangely emotional. They drop out at the turn of a page in an unrelated narrative as if something borrowed must be returned. It's funny because those things were lost once, found again, and now found by us, right? Even though we don't know those people. This one is about eavesdropping and sex, and of course, it's set in Taos. It's at the Cafe Taza. At the next table, girl in the yellow dress at the Cafe Taza says that tantric sex has knocked her silly. Her boyfriend looks so ordinary, drinking foam off cafe latte. And this is also a short poem about love. Um, it was really about becoming a mom, and it's called Valentine for my daughter. I did not know that I could love like this, love like a juggernaut upon an iron track. Before you came, my heart stayed in my body, did not grow legs to walk the world without me. And if you've ever had a mother, I think she probably felt that way about you. And if you've ever been a mother, I think you probably felt that way. There's something kind of amazing about that level of connection, which is also not a connection. And I think that really, a lot of poetry is about metaphor, where there's two sides to something and trying to bring those two sides together in a way that doesn't, it's like a relationship where those two things together are better than those two things apart, but where one thing doesn't cancel out another. And that's pretty obvious in another short poem called Forest Fire Sijo. A Sijo is a Korean form, 3 lines, very long syllabics. Um, it's kind of as if you took two haiku and dropped them. I mean, that's not how it's supposed to be, but that's how I experience it. And obviously, this is not written in ancient Korean, but the form has taken off internationally, and people do write them in English. Forest Fire Sijo. Forest fire smoke obscures the mountains. We wait for rain. All day, the car radio plays only Riders on the Storm. From 400 miles, west wind carries the ash of love letters. This is one about Santa Fe Community College. It's called Writing Workshop, and it was about teaching haiku. And Busan is one of the 4 haiku masters, and he has a haiku about the javelin holders. They're like guards. They're standing out in the bitter cold, and they're like soldiers. They're not affected by the cold. And I just noticed something when I taught that poem, and that's what this is about. Writing workshop. Busan's haiku about the javelin holders in the cold. All the veterans in the class perk up, even though right here it is spring. So I put little blue stickies for my short poems, and then pink stickies for the ones I want to read the most, and yellow stickies for the one I'm conflicted about. So we'll see how far I get with the pink stickies. And if I go on to yellow, you'll be the second to know. This is something I saw driving north to Abiquiu, very New Mexican, but sort of scene or apparition, but it impacted me deeply, and I recorded it. Visitor. On the east side of the highway, a woman parks by the descansos, takes out her Taos hand drum, and in her fringed jacket begins beating a rhythm for the dead. I, who am driving north, burst into tears, wondering if this is an anniversary. I see these memorials every day, but never before someone who has come to greet the spirits. Across Abiquiu Dam, beneath the cosmic shape known as Pedernal, all I can call up is my fear and my love of wandering. Not a tent, not a yurt, not a teepee. My body isn't exactly a square or a triangle, rather a body-shaped hole I sometimes fall through. Tidying up, I find neatly zipped into a pocket of my backpack boarding passes from a flight I don't remember ever taking. I'm going to read a longer poem about fire, about forest fire, which, is a huge concern for us. And I feel like it deserves uh, time in poems, right? Because poetry is often about the pastoral, the beauty of nature, right? How that heals us. And so, what does something like a forest fire do to everything? And, this was written many years ago, but it could have been written last week. It's called Signal Fire. A plume of smoke in the mountain behind town. I just stepped out of the movie 13 Assassins and enjoyed samurai hacking each other and wondered about my own death on a summer's afternoon, feeling content until driving home. I saw it to the north, conflagration, and knew exactly where it was, what canyon, like seeing a look of terrible pain cross the face of someone you love. Each direction should have its colors and signs, but here everything cardinal is fire. Red phoenix of summer solstice, wildflower with its message, hexagram drawn with a stick and dirt. Your fortune is crossed. The palm reader or Sister Rosa, just around the corner off Sierra Vista, sees a small bonfire burn the hearts off the cards. Or a column of smoke by day, a flame by night, which leads across a barren wasteland, but to where? Charred needles dropped from a great height by the prevailing winds. A physicist, a child on a swing. Try Googling pictures of cities. Find Nineveh, where God's hand was stayed, Nagasaki, where it was not. Try Googling, on what day will I die, or God sends rain. Try prayer or just sleeping through it. I pack my passport, 3 pairs of underpants, and not much else. Won't save the photograph from its edge curling in flame. Lodgepole pine sealed with resin, ponderosa forest with savanna before the grazing cattle. A crown fire burns ghosts of aspen, those silvery trees that must char before they sprout. Earth's divination reveals destruction, more than a change, a renewal. Wind and black fire on white fire, day, night. A compass needle spins without foresight. The next two poems are weird. I wrote them, but they're weird even to me. I could just pretend and say, they're surreal or they're just, leaping poetry, but they're strange. And I'm going to share them with you. This one, uh, there's things in it that entertain me, and I hope they will too. Rust never sleeps. I lie in the expensive bed in the airport motel, serene and hypnagogic state. In the middle of the night, awake, feeling trouble multiply within my cells in the body's tender parts. I dream a friend of mine, a mediator, is trying to mitigate a quarrel between a man and a woman. Numerous people live within me, along with disease and even health. I see you in the early morning light, carting your entire personality through security and on to elsewhere. So there's a couple poems in this collection that are written in airport motels, those liminal spaces between one world and the next, right? While you were out, naked woman with an owl on her head. The angel left the sick girl. Facades contained both numbers and alphabets. An Islamic silver ring inscribed thanks to God. A window on something else, bands of color, no allegory, vertical landscape, erosion and continental drift. The gravel had my gratitude. At the end of the ladder, butterflies obscured the Chinese characters. You couldn't locate your history on the tree ring, but took a Greyhound bus away from solitude. And it's it's of interest to me that these poems are often about being alone. It's almost like every poem that I ever wrote about love, about connection got put into a book, right? Because they communicate easily, or I understand how they're communicating. But since this book is called What Solitude Sees in Me, and here it is. And the thing about the Greyhound bus was my dad used to say, my father, Eli Sagan, used to say, there's no problem or situation so bad that you can't take a Greyhound bus away from it. This has haunted me for many years because in a way it's true, and in a way it's not true. But at the end of that poem, I'm trying hard to make it true. This is one of my favorite poems in the book. It's for the audience. That's you, but you seem very well behaved. It's really for like a classical music audience or a jazz audience where the audience acts out. So it was written really going to many concerts with Chatter, incredible avant-garde series here and in Albuquerque, and then watching the audience lose it. Score for the audience. I'd like to compose a piece of music for the audience. A cough, 3 in a row. The noise of small random objects dropping out of a purse or pocket. Sighs. Unsilenced cell phones going off in patterned ringtones, a bird call, the opening notes of a golden oldie, chimes, church bells. Add in construction from the street. The gas company retrofitting lines as noisy as if the road crew were attempting to excavate Atlantis or Mycenae, but in the wrong location. Now, a car alarm. It stops. It starts again. Sounds get wilder and wilder. The audience applauds between movements, between notes, while on stage the orchestra murmurs bravo in its sleep. I I've been known to applaud at the wrong time in a concert, and I feel very guilty, and that's why I put it in into the score. Um, I think I'm on the yellow ones now. I'm going to read a few more poems. Let's see what the other ones are a surprise to me even. Oh, okay. This is called Dark Star Park. It's about a sculpture by Nancy Holt, who lived here for many years, who was a Zen teacher. She was the widow of Robert Smithson, who was one of the original land art artists, and she did beautiful sculptural work about time. And this is essentially in Rosslyn, Virginia, where I was with my father-in-law and tracked down one of her sculptures. I want to say that a regret that I have in life is that I met her on several occasions and I never told her that I worshiped her. I never told her how much I loved her work. So when you think of yourself as a writer, as a poet, or whatever kind of writing, you probably have within you sort of your own, Olympians, your own gods and demigods of those who've inspired you, like what's touched you, and what's important to you. And so I kept writing her poems after she died. And then I began to feel that I should have said, Nancy Holt, I love your work, but I was too shy. So we have this poem instead. Dark Star Park. We walk through granite spheres. Some things have happened, some things have not. You, me, your widowed father, it's humid in suburban Rosslyn, Virginia. Each year I pass the anniversary of my death, not knowing yet to light a candle. Office building windows reflect the light. Time is no palindrome, can't be read equally backwards and forwards. These globes won't roll suddenly across the watered grass and into traffic, much as I might wish for Satori, or at least excitement. This was written in Southern Colorado many years ago. It's really part of my endlessly looking at the sky at the observatory. 3 little girls ran up the hill as Venus was setting, as if for a better view. Through the telescope, I saw the planet as a crescent twinkling in the atmosphere. Pointing at the center of the Milky Way, saw stars born and tied together like siblings or aspen trees, twin stars, one yellow, one blue, of Aldebaran, eye of Cygnus, the swan, clear sight of Jupiter with its 4 moons that let Galileo understand we are not the center of the universe. A fair-haired girl was reading a book by the light of the setting evening star and later by her cell phone. You'll ruin your eyes, I exclaimed, as if I were her mother. She laughed and turned the page. I mean, who was she, right? She's this little girl, and now she's probably a grown-up, and well, she was reading, so that was so great. The last of the yellows is about a place that's very dear to my heart, Las Vegas, Nevada. Okay, I can't defend it. I can only admit it, but I love Las Vegas, and I've spent a lot of time there with relatives and just being a tourist. And I was there with my husband Rich Valentine's Day many years ago. And Las Vegas is another portal. It's a portal into parallel, mysterious, weird universes, and that's what I like about it. Vegas. Those mute guardians of the self, headless generalissimos, decapitated colonial statue, or a walled niche with breasts, torso like a psycho killer's antiquities. Real bamboo, fake bamboo, real noodles, real waitress whose real mother has hysterical blindness from her place in history. Fountain of Buddhas, illuminated cones, a real job for a woman, dealing baccarat, driving a cab, dancing on a pole, a water buffalo designed of topiary flowers, a 10-foot statue of one of the happy immortals, pagoda, golden koi, a real barrier gate, yellow-tailed skeleton of a fish, think neon, homeless man begging with a cardboard sign, vet, the fountains at the Bellagio, dancing to Copland's swell of notes, 'tis a gift to be simple, an irony lost in the spray, Jesus, 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 the street corner preacher exhorts us, as Venus rises in the east, as does everything over Caesar's. Dozens of brides, short, young, old, plump, bosomies, smiling, drunk, with groomsmen in kilts or tuxes, and just one feckless, tattooed groom to hold on to. It's Valentine's Day after all, and you are in bed with me. My dream that you can't use a capital I anymore in a poem because there is no self. Now you are so deep in America, you cannot get out. It's raining, and I pick up a spray of purple velvet orchids in the street. I'm going to read maybe two more poems, but I just want to say that that line has been quoted. Now you are so deep in America, you can't get out. And it sounds ominous and political, and maybe it was, but really, I think it was about feeling like lost in what was like very alien to me and yet very familiar. So I think what I'm going to do is read another two poems, and then we'll just kind of stretch, and I'll talk a little bit about how to put a poetry manuscript together, how I put this one together, and I know that many of you, are writers, how you put a book together or don't, and then we'll open it up and chat a little bit about it, and I'm sure people have other things to say. So I'll go back to my pink ones. I'm going to read the last two poems in the book. It's another very short one. It's called Midnight Pea in a Can, and it's about when I was living in a remote monastery in Crestone, Colorado. Thank goodness it's short. It doesn't really tell you about that experience. It condenses it. Midnight, pea in a can. Outside in the dark, all the Sangre de Cristos, white-capped. And the last poem in the book is, and for this reading, is Just Jump. To leap from the lip of the granite quarry is to show off, become a corpse, touch the angel of burning air on the way down. Pick one. To break the surface of the water is to acquire a body, to brush domes and towers with bare feet, to change your name, to return to center, all of the above. Thank you so much for listening, and take a breath. It's, in the Russian circus, the performers applaud the audience, which I believe is a really good thing. So this is a good time to put questions in for Valerie. And I am going to connect my process, talk a little bit about it, and then open it up. So I alluded to this at the beginning. Basically, I'm cleaning out my studio. I'm sending boxes to the archive, Southwestern Women's Writing in beautiful Library Whitliff collection in San Marcos, Texas. And people always say, you just sent them your journals and you just sent them everything. And yes, is the answer. I put a seal of 50 years on the journals, but it doesn't matter because nobody can read my handwriting. So if they were really looking for dirt, it would seem very obscure. But anyway, I'm happy that it has a home, if that makes sense. So I'm looking at these poems and I'm realizing that I don't know how I feel about them. And so I start putting them into three areas: yes, no, and maybe. And, my mother used to do that with back to school clothes. We would try on clothes. They'd be yes, no, and maybe. And maybe tends to be no, I think, is what it is. So then there were a few left over. Then there were more left over. Then there were about 70 pages left over. And so I put them together. I added in some new poems and I gave it to my husband, Rich, to proofread and to get an opinion. And he said, these do not hang together. Well, why would they hang together, right? They did not hang together because um, nobody put them together. So what I did is I ended up having to sort of rip things out, take out a lot of things so that the connections became clearer more easily. Great thing about poetry is it's not like bronze sculpture. You make a mistake, it doesn't cost you anything, right? I mean, you might be miserable, but it doesn't cost you money, it doesn't take that much time. So the one thing I want to admit just straight off about putting a book together is that it is very difficult. It is surprisingly difficult. You'd think, well, what the heck, right? I'm just going to mash my work in there, my short stories, but it has a lot of skill sets, but nobody tells you what they are. So it can be frustrating on that level. I've noticed that, recently, this pertains both to poetry and to fiction. People feel that their book needs to have tremendous unity, like all the poems need to be about flowers or their mother. And this can get a little repetitious and dull unless you're like a genius about writing about your mother and your flowers. It kind of comes out of, MFA programs where people tend to think thematically and there's strength in that, but I feel like it can be overdone. There's contests where they only want books that all hang together. So I feel there's pressure sort of in the poetry world to have books that are very cohesive. But the truth is that no book is that cohesive. When I was thinking about this earlier today, I was thinking about the word bookie and the phrase making book, which means to gamble. The bookie sets the odds, that's making book, and then you place your money. And I was thinking how making a book is a little bit like making book that you're gambling. You're gambling on guessing, you're gambling on putting things together. And I think it's important for us as writers when we do this just to admit that it's stressful and weird. I mean, it's not a completely natural process. There are, great strategies. I'm going to share the ones that I liked the best with you. And the really scary one that works really, really well is randomizing. I learned this first from Susan Gardner, who was my editor on many books with Red Mountain, and I had sent her a book. Let's just say I really liked this book a lot. And it had all kinds of secret thematic material. And she was like, I hate the order that it's in. You should randomize it. And I'm like, what is that? And she goes, that's where you throw the manuscript up in the air and put it together randomly. Now, if you had told me, herding poems, if you had told me that I had to like be mean to a kitten, I was really upset. I was like, I can't do this. I know this sounds insane, but I was like, I cannot randomize this. I can't throw these in the air. And I went and I got myself a casita at 10,000 waves, and I spent 24 hours swearing to myself that I would throw them up in the air. And about midway through, I threw them up in the air and I put them back together. And of course, that allows you to see how things are connected to each other and where there's redundancy. And of course, there's no rule that you have to keep them that way. Of course, I guess I thought there was a rule. You know what I mean? If you hate the way it looks, you can always move it. So that was helpful. Um, my friend Kathleen Lee, editor at Blue Edge Press, Blue Edge Books, who's helped me many times, both professionally in that capacity and as a friend, she also believes in randomizing, but she believes that you should have an opening and an ending, that you can have those tight bookends, and then in the middle, it's random. So, poets have many incorrect beliefs about our readers. And Miriam Bobkoff, an old friend of mine, now deceased, who was a public librarian, once said to me, "Nobody reads a book of poetry all the way through." I was like, "That's horrifying." She was like, "How do you think people read? They pick it up, they read one or two, they go to bed." I was like, "They're not allowed to do that. They have to read it all the way through." Well, I began to understand what she was saying. And if people are not going to read it all the way through, the order by its nature, once it comes out in the world, is, it's going to be a little looser. There's also something, and I'd be curious to hear from other people about this, where I find that I'm very attached to how I wrote the poem, what order, how I was feeling. And nobody else cares about that. And this came home to me, and actually in a very beautiful way recently. I was in Vail and heard Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade, and when he wrote it, he had all these notes. This is the part where Aladdin rubs the lamp. This is the part where Sinbad sets sail. And after years of this, he dropped the notes. So he's long dead, and there were no notes. He cared about how he wrote it, if that makes sense. He felt a certain way, he loved it, but the audience 100 years later is not going to really care. And in a way, throwing out those notes, it liberates the audience to see and feel what they want. So it's, for me, very hard to let go. I had given Kath a rough manuscript once, and she said, "This is the order you wrote it in." And I was like, "Yes, isn't that lovely?" "Isn't that great?" And she was like, "Nope." And now we come again back to that mean word, randomize. So let me see what other notes I have. You know, I think really it's about letting go of over explaining when when you make a book, because you're actually letting go of the book, right? I I'd love to have I think I'd love to have nobody read my book without my appearing and telling them how to feel about it. But if that was the case, well, how many people would read it? Like two. So it is going out into the world without you, and it's going to change as a result of that. It's going to mutate. Um, so I would say that's my basic sort of, not exact, a little long for a TED talk, but nonetheless. And well, I think I'll tell one more short example of randomizing. So I had a book written after my first husband died. It was a manuscript. It was called The Widow's Coat, and it was about falling in love again. And I sent it to Ashada Press, which is Boise State. I loved them. They had done two of Leo Romero's incredible books, and I just loved them. And they sent me back the kind of letter that's torment, where they were like, "We like the book, but too much dead husband, too much boyfriend, resubmit it." So I was having a breakdown because that's what the book was about. I gave it to my friend Carol Moldow, very brilliant poet, and she did something that I didn't understand what it was, but she explained it later. She went and she divided everything in the book into the 4 seasons. So it started with summer, fall, winter, and spring. She took out like 2 poems. She sent it back to me. It looked much better. I sent it to them. They accepted it. I said, "Carol, what did you do?" She said, "I just put it into the 4 seasons," which is a very kind of Japanese aesthetic. And why it worked, I don't know. But again, I think it was a kind of randomization, right? So the things got mixed up with each other so they weren't just repeating. Um, I'll end my portion of talking with a fabulous quote from the Latin poet Catullus. He says, "Go, little book." That's all he says about his book, "Go." And so that's a very energetic way of reaching out to other people. So we got questions, Valerie? Do you want
Yes,
to
we
help me with one?
do. And thank you for sharing some of the secrets of how this all comes together. It's really important and it's great to see behind the curtain a little bit. We do have some great questions, so I'll just go ahead and start with the first one. Why did you think or feel that one of the airport poems was weird? I didn't feel that way about it.
Whoever you are, you're very kind. Um, in the introduction to this book, I talk about my first husband, Robert Winson, who was a fabulous literary editor. And he used to say, you don't put anything that you think is quirky into your books. You just put in the capital P poems. I think maybe when things are not perfectly smooth or fancy, they make me nervous, right? Even if I'm the one who wrote them, if they have a little rough edge, half the time other people don't see that rough edge, right? Maybe it's how it was written,
Mm.
a little slapdash, or took a little bit of a chance. Because I think you're right. When I look at them, I'm like, these are not the weirdest things ever written, but they were weird to me. So, anybody have any thoughts on writing something you think is weird, or if you won't admit it yet? If it
I
comes to
have kind of a follow-up question. Do you, I think time kind of takes the edge off some of
totally.
the feelings about poems. Was this an old poem or a new one? And did you process it in a different way as you made the collection?
I think the airport poem is new-ish, but it had what I think of as a kind of a little bit of a surreal jump in it that I was finding with other, you know what? Once it got some other friends that were a little jumpy themselves, I think I settled down in my mind about them. That's a good question. Thank you.
All right, another question. The gas company may be evacuating Mycenae or Atlantis. I love your well of metaphors and allusions. What do you think of the young people who no longer have these locations of time or locators of time?
Well, it's a, it's a good question. I don't truly know the answer because I don't know that people don't know those things. But I did once, write a poem that I'm the only person on the west side of Santa Fe who cares about the city of Troy. And I think that's true. I mean, I was educated, in a classical manner, which was ordinary for its time. I do think that it's important to understand the history of the form you're writing in the language that you speak. I think it's also important to know about the rest of the world, right? I mean, without translation, it would be like being colorblind. As an English speaker, you would miss so much in terms of writing. So I would say I hope that somebody else cares about Troy, but I think that there is a sense of the past just in the act of writing a lyric poem, because the lyric poem comes out of the past. It's not a contemporary or modern form. So that when you engage with it, even if you engage in writing a rock and roll song, you know, that's in ballad measure, that's very old. I mean, it's 500, 600 years old, ballad measure. So I would say that even if you're not conscious of it, the past is coming along with you. And let's hope you can. I mean, I think you should get with it, but if you hate getting with it, it'll come along. You know what I mean? When just even the metrics or syllables, you have all of English poetry that you probably haven't even read, but you have it in your ear, and you certainly with songwriting, it's all there.
Great, thank you. How many poems in this collection did you anguish over how they hang together? Say a bit more about your process.
Um, the first part is how many poems?
Yes.
I think it's about 70, and I think that was my secret cutoff. You know what I mean? It's like, if it was like 36, a little chapbook would be like uncollected poems that maybe didn't need to be collected, right? It doesn't have much weight to it. Yeah, I would say I agonized. I don't think I took anything out that should have been in. How does that sound? And I put a couple of newish poems in for a bad reason, because I couldn't resist. The book is coming out, right? I think maybe somebody will take it. The book will come out. I want the new things in, and I hoped they didn't stick out. But I did have, a half a book at one time about about Hawaii, and those really did not belong. Very, very sad. But again, I didn't. It's not like I had to throw them out. That's what I would keep telling myself. You don't have to throw them out. Just put them in a different file. So yeah, I think there was agony over it, and why not?
I didn't write this question, but I like it. I love the library poem. Question: why hadn't any of these poems made it into your numerous other poetry collections, and how do you think of the titles for your books of poetry?
Ah, Jeff Bryan, who is a wonderful editor and who was the editor for many years of La Alameda Press, fantastic New Mexico press. He used to say the title is in the manuscript, which was a great thing, but also a stressful thing because then you're all over New Mexico. Poets are reading their manuscript, trying to say, "What's the title? What's the title?" and looking at something random and saying that's not the title because it wasn't. I think he was right most of the time. Um, I do think the title can be buried in the book, and so sometimes a title will just come from a line of poetry, which is fine, and that's the case with this. But secretly, I love a title that doesn't come from the poems. Um, I'm working on a book that might be out maybe in 3 or 4 months called Enough About That. And there's nothing in it that has anything to do with enough about that. I just, I just love the title, right? I mean, what's not to love? You might say it 5 times a day, but enough about that. I'll stop complaining about Albertsons or whatever it was. So titles can be hard. I think they're hard for people in general. They can be what I would call painterly, where they set the scene. They have something beautiful or impressionistic about the book. They can come, as Jeff Bryan suggested, right out of the poem. And I mean, it's like a gift from the gods to get a jazzy title that works.
Okay, here's another question. Do any of the poems ever end up getting revised as a result of sequencing or putting them together in another collection?
Totally. There are much more dedicated, serious revisers all around me. Most poets I know are very, very serious about revising, and I envy it, but it is not my strong point. I will revise when I see it, but I'm not one of those people who can just chop a little, trim a little until the truth opens up about a poem. So yes, I think it's a wonderful experience to be able to revise something that's long gone but still revisable, right? Because you can try to revise a poem, and if the poem is pretty much dead, it's not going to come to life just by taking out commas and putting in em dashes. So it is an opportunity to revise, though, definitely.
So this is an interesting question. Does it ever happen that someone disagrees with you about what you say the poem is about?
Whoever asked that, it's very cool. I think I've had it the reverse more, which is I've told people what I thought their poem was about, and they disagreed with me, right? When you're the reader, you do think, aha, I've seen into the heart of this poem. Although I would say the most common thing is that somebody sees something that I did not understand that came out of the unconscious mind. And when somebody will say that there's an obsession in here with how the moon changes, which is kind of like human life. And I'll be like, I had no idea. So it's great. It's great when somebody can tell you something. I mean, of course, anybody who sends their poetry out to editors, the editor will send back that obscure thing not for us, and you're going to disagree with that. You're going to say, "Oh, it's perfect for you," but you can't do anything about that. I would say, you know, there is hidden, even to the writer, often to the writer, text within a piece of writing, and that's because it's coming out of a creative place that's not completely conscious.
This next statement aligns with what you're talking about, so I'll just read it. I paint and I kind of like that it's usually not obvious what I was feeling when I painted it. I release it to the world and it has its own meaning to those viewing it. Poetry seems sort of in between telling a story and an abstract painting. You're creating imagery with words, not linearly necessarily. Enough said. Speak to this.
That's a really great way of extending the thought, and very interesting to hear it to be about visual art as well. I think it's also probably about music and all of the arts. Actually, I'm just checking in with you guys. There might be another question or two, but does anybody have anything to add about how you would structure a book or problems that you have structuring a book or thoughts on any of these? I'd say I'd give you extra credit for a question, but there is no extra credit.
If you have something to say, please feel free to unmute yourself. I think we're a small enough group, we can do that.
Or at the end, maybe if you want. Have you got another question, Valerie?
Short question, do you write poetry every day?
I know that's from Judith. Well, so there's like lies and truth and what you'll say in public. Um, Here's the lie. The lie is I write poetry every day and you should too. That's the inspirational lie, right? Why? Because what you don't do, you're not going to develop. And we tend to think of daily practice, whatever it is, whether it's washing the dishes or, you know, a practice of kindness or exercise or anything like that. You want your day to be like a little microcosm of your life. It should have the things that are important to you in it. I think it's hard to write poetry every day because poetry doesn't necessarily appear to us every day. Poetry might be somewhere else. And therefore I'm writing it, but it does not care about me. So it's a little bit, I don't want to be, too secure, but I would say it's good for me, and I think for other people too, to practice poetry in some way every day, to read it, to write in a journal, to write lines, to be playful, to not try to create something, um, you know, to go to the hardware store and see what the fabulous names are on the paint samples and count that as, poetry research. So I think it's good to stay warmed up. It's very difficult, and I know a lot of people experience this, to hit a very bad dry period and then to try to come out of it because you're not warmed up. And it's difficult and it can be excruciating. So I would say try to stay warmed up.
What a great answer. Thank you for your honesty and reality. How do you resist the temptation of revising a poem when you're getting a collection ready for publication?
Since I'm bad at revising, I don't resist. Like if I get the urge to revise, it's as if somebody got the urge to like walk 5 miles briskly. It might not happen all that often. So I feel compelled to revise because it's like, the reason I'm revising is because I see something is horribly askew. And I don't count revising as like copy editing. Do you know what I mean? It needs a capital, it needs a comma. Uh, the music of the poem isn't apparent. That's easy. But actually, when you say this should come out and something else should come in, I would say go with it. If you have trouble revising, if you're revising your whole life long, you could set an egg timer. You could tell yourself you can only revise for 20 minutes or something. But I think it's as faults go, it's a great fault to have.
So this kind of aligns with what you're talking about. Do you ever take a poem and put it into another form, such as a high burn or some other high
That's
boom?
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Whoever asks that, like, I think you know what you're doing because it's a great technique, right? To take something, put it into a different form, then maybe knock it back to its original form or knock it into something that's not even a form at all. It's a great transition. Um, okay, when I was young, like 100 years ago, I used to write 40 or 50 drafts of every poem because I want to feel like I was working. Do you know what I mean? We live in a society that doesn't really value non-monetary artistic creation. And I felt like I need to work. So I would keep everything clipped together. And then that faded. It stopped feeling like work. Or a more positive way to look at it could be I learned to do something, right? If you did something every day between the ages of 20 and 35, you should have learned something. So it got easier. But I do think it's a great technique. I've had some bad luck with it, like thinking something is definitely a piece of prose with a haiku attached and just, you know, put the squeeze on it, and it really was not. It might have just been the haiku.
And this is the last question I'll ask, and then we'll really open it up for people to say what they would like. But I think this is a beautiful question. The line, each year I pass the anniversary of my death and not know it, speaks to speaks so powerfully to me at this point in my life right now. Will you say a bit more about that line of the poem or the poem, I need to get your latest book?
Uh,
Yes, you do.
to get my latest book, you can get it online, and you can go to Casa Urraca's website and buy it, and you can get an independent bookseller to buy it. But I want to add, if you don't want to spend money, you could get your library to buy it. Oftentimes, writers say, "Oh, I hate library sales," because one book could be read by many people. But I've been around librarians my whole life, and I could never say that. So the book is findable. I the Nancy Holt sculpture was about a date in time, and how every year we come around, as we know from our own lives, we come around to the anniversary of our birth, and we come around to the anniversaries of people we know who have died. And then it was kind of just a revelation, the realization that on my personal calendar is a dormant, unknown date, right? That's the parenthesis, that it will have your name and then your birth date, which you know about, which you didn't know about when you were inside your mother's womb, right? But everyone told you that was the date you emerged. And then there's the date of departure. And so there's a kind of closed parenthesis. The Nancy Holt piece was very haunting about time. And so I guess I let it haunt me a little. But that idea came to me in the poem. It was not an idea that I'd had before. Do you know what I mean? Although, you might have a romantic thing of like, will I die in springtime or what have you, or this is a good day to die. But really, that's not what this was. This was about how you're on a big circle and how it's somewhat invisible to us until it becomes visible.
All right, so please feel free to unmic yourself and talk about anything you would like or ask a question.
Miriam, it's Julia. I just wanted to say I love your work.
Oh, Julia, I love you. How nice that you're here. You got off work.
I didn't know how to write this out in a way that seemed coherent, but if I look at things I wrote 30 years ago, I feel like it's cute that I was trying to do things, but not like, oh, let me republish them for all the world to see. Do you encounter that all, that the voice or how you're approaching things is almost a different person?
I think that's like a very crucial question. Um, so I rejected probably two-thirds of what I had. And I had this thing about them that I think you can relate to. I thought somebody with my name and interests wrote this poem, but it can't possibly be me because it's either so immature, undeveloped, you know what I mean, or just plain odd. So yes, I do think a lot of what was written in the past can stay in the past, right? I wouldn't say bring everything you ever wrote to light. This was actually very, very shocking to me because I really was a fan of, like, let sleeping poems lie.
Uh,
But they most of them do not go back. Really, they go back to maybe my 40s when I felt like I had some sense of what I was doing.
To last year.
Yes.
Nice.
Thanks, Miriam.
Thank you, Julia.
Miriam Bobkoff was right, Miriam.
She was so right.
She was so right.
She was so
I
right.
I mean, I never imagined I guess in the books of poetry that I've read, that it would have been put together thinking that someone would read it straight through. So
Misty, the truth is the only people who read it through are the editors, right? If they're going to, like, you send it to the editor, they're going to take the book, they read it, or maybe they read the first three and then they toss it. But it was, she was a reader and a librarian, so she knew something I didn't know, which was that the book is not actually like an intact, piece of sculpture. It's just out there with its pages fluttering and somebody's dropped it in the bathtub, we can all hope. Thank you for saying that.
So, and I did the painter question, and I actually like the sort of privacy of painting. I mean, some people will ask me what I was feeling, and I'll say, well, what are you feeling when you look at it? Like, to me, that was my moment with it when I was in process with it, when I was painting, and now it has its own life that has less and less to do with me. And so I was just, I don't know if all writers, I mean, I don't know if every artist has their own unique experience or if it's classifiable by genre. I mean, I know I'm also an artist who I don't care for artist statements that go into all these details about symbolism. I'm just like, it's not yours anymore. It's out in the world. People will get from it what they get from it. And in a sense, it's none of your business.
I mean, I think there's a conflict between professionalism and the creative relationship between the creator and the viewer or the reader. I mean, for professional purposes, you're trying to get a grant, right? Or you're trying to get this or that. Things are packaged up very tightly, and that can be bad for you. I mean, if you buy into it as something other than practicalities, things are not packaged up very tightly. In fact, that's not what they're meant to do. I mean, the poem does have a life of its own. It almost has a life of its own, even when the poet is breathing down its neck, let alone when the poet lets go of it. So that's a great point. Anybody want to tell us the secret of how they put their perfect book together?
Miriam, I was just going to ask you, did you do the throwing the pages up in the air method? Did you do that more than once? Have you done that more than once?
Yes, I do it all the time now.
Now you do it all there you go.
I
Okay.
mean, I hated it so much, Jude, the first time, and I was so scared. It's kind of silly, like why? But I was.
Well, it
But
must be like liberating in a way.
yeah, very liberating. I do it.
Yeah.
I do it all the time. I mean, and you don't actually have to you could scatter them. It doesn't have to be this big action where you're like, toss it. You could just stretch them out and then put them back together and see what's going on. I will do it again. How does that sound?
Oh, and also I wanted to say I do like the idea of you appearing in person when somebody is reading your book. Namely me. I would love a personal appearance.
We'll make a date. All right, guys.
Well, thank you so much, Miriam. This has been wonderful. Hearing your work and hearing your process, it's so powerful. And thank you for sharing it with us.
It's been really great. It makes me super happy to be with you all. And thank you, Valerie. Take good care. Have a nice evening.